I'm in Israel, and of course Hamas violated the peace deal. Now they're getting bombed. I get my popcorn ready. Let the fireworks begin.
The dead-eyed Republican psychopath that you just heard from is Valentina Gomez, who's running to represent the 31st District of Texas. And I'm sure that you're not going to be too surprised to find out that that is not the first time that she's celebrated murder. She's also released videos of herself executing immigrants in effigy and frequently openly uses eliminationist rhetoric when referring to LGBTQ plus people, as well as Muslims and other marginalized groups. And I don't really know what she was looking at from Israel, but it could have been any number of war crimes being committed by Israel despite the existence of a supposed ceasefire. They did launch more than 100 deadly strikes into Rafah and Khan Yunis on numerous sites, including a cafe, a phone charging station, a group of journalists, and even a house sheltering displaced people. And all of these attacks together killed 15 Palestinians. Now, with regard to this particular incident, Israel claims that that was in response to Hamas killing 2 Israeli fighters in Rafah, but the Qassam Brigades, which is the military unit of Hamas, says that the militants that were allegedly involved in the skirmish weren't associated with them. In fact, they've lost contact with those particular fighters and haven't been in contact with them since March. But even if we were to believe Israel, which we should never do, by the way, their response was obviously not proportional. I think that killing 15 Palestinians, innocent Palestinians, is not warranted because of skirmishes between militants and IDF soldiers. But it's not surprising for the fact that Israel has already violated the ceasefire 80 times by killing 97 Palestinians at a minimum, including 11 members of the Abu Shaban family in the Zaytun neighborhood who was bombed by Israel while they were driving home. 7 children and 3 women were killed in this particular war crime. So maybe that's what Valentina was gleefully busting out the popcorn for. A vehicle of mostly children getting butchered by Israel on their way home. But who knows? And I just want to point out that there were so many people telling us that this would all be over once Hamas returned the hostages, yet here we are. But, she could have also been watching debris from them bulldozing Palestinian homes, which is still happening. But despite all of this, and despite Israel not letting in aid like they're supposed to as part of the deal, the Trump regime claims that the ceasefire is still totally in effect. And he already had his own George W. Bush-esque mission accomplished moment to congratulate himself on a job well done. So he's going to do everything he can to uphold that facade that the ceasefire is still in effect, even though he had to send J.D. Vance to Israel to convince them to be patient. And the reason why he even has to do this is because Israel is justifying their violations of the ceasefire by accusing Hamas of violating it first, because they're not returning the bodies of hostages that are currently buried under rubble fast enough. Now, the reason why it's difficult to get them out is because Israel bombed all of Gaza to smithereens. There's also 10,000 Palestinians buried under rubble as well. And as Al Jazeera reports on Friday, Hamas reiterated that it is committed to the terms of the ceasefire deal, but that recovery was very difficult given the sheer volume of rubble Israel created with its relentless bombing. Without new equipment and external assistance, Hamas noted, the effort would be slow and could not be guaranteed. But in response, Israel is saying, nope, that's all bullshit. The slow return of the remains of hostages is a clear sign of bad faith, and it means that Hamas is in violation of the agreement. Therefore, we get to violate the agreement and indiscriminately bomb Palestinians again. But I mean, this is why Trump sent J.D. Vance to Israel to urge them to be patient, because even the Trump regime knows that there is a plethora of logistical issues with retrieving the remains of bodies buried under rubble. In fact, Trump himself acknowledged this.
But they're digging. They're actually digging. There are areas where they're digging and they're finding a lot of bodies. Then they have to separate the bodies. You wouldn't believe this. And some of those bodies have been in there a long time. And some of them are under rubble. They have to remove rubble.
So if Israel was genuinely concerned about getting the remaining bodies, they would make sure that Hamas had the excavation equipment that they need to get them out as soon as possible. But here's the thing about that. Israel is full of shit because, as Dropsite News reports, an Israeli outlet contends that Israel has actually blocked an 80-person team of Turkish excavators from entering Gaza, even though they were bringing in heavy equipment needed to get the bodies out of the rubble. The reason why is because Israel claims that there's no need for the Turkish aid crews. Yeah, except the real reason is that once they get the remains back, then what excuse will they have to keep bombing Palestinians indiscriminately? See, they're looking for any reason to keep the genocide going and really to resume the genocide at full pace. But if they can't find an excuse, then they're just going to keep doing the genocide anyway, because that's what we've seen now for 2 years. They don't have to have an excuse to bulldoze homes and annex territory in the West Bank, but yet they still do that. I mean, there's no Hamas in the West Bank, but they're doing that anyway. But of course, if they can cook up some sort of bullshit excuse, they would prefer to do that in order to give themselves at least a tiny bit of plausible deniability. Case in point, they've imprisoned a 16-year-old American citizen named Mohammed Zahir Ibrahim, and he's been held for 6 months without a trial after he was abducted by the IDF in the middle of the night following accusations that he threw rocks at IDF soldiers. But he's had no contact whatsoever with his parents and has lost 25 pounds in Israeli custody due to a very bad case of scabies, which is something that other Palestinian hostages are also suffering from due to overcrowding, unsanitary conditions, and a lack of medical attention in Israeli prisons, as Prem Tucker of Ziteo reports. But regardless if they have an excuse or not, they're going to continue to keep doing what they want to do and continue to get away with it because they have the unconditional backing of the U.S. government. They're literal partners in crime. In the same way that Israel bombs Iran and Yemen and violates the other ceasefire agreement that they supposedly have with Lebanon, Trump is doing a similar thing in a different part of the world. He's murdering Colombian, Trinidadian, and Venezuelan fishermen in the Caribbean under the pretense of them being drug traffickers, even though he has no evidence for that. Because the United States and Israel, they think that if they can scream drugs or crime or Hamas, that gives them a justification to do whatever the fuck they want and ignore international law and even domestic law in the case of Trump. But I don't even know why they're bothering to uphold the facade anymore at this point, because they're getting away with whatever they want to do because might makes right. That's the extent of it. It seems like an oversimplification, but Occam's razor. They're stronger. Nobody can compete with them in terms of military force. So they get to do whatever the fuck they want to do, commit as many war crimes as they want. If you're the United States, or if you have the backing of the United States government, as Israel does, you can literally do anything you want to do with impunity. You can even commit a genocide in 4K and wipe Gaza off the map, as Israel has done. I mean, just take a look at this video that was uploaded to Twitter by the UN relief chief, and it shows them driving through Gaza, and as you can see, there's nothing left. It's all gone. There's not a single building standing. And this is what all of Gaza looks like. It's gone. Even Jared Kushner said in a 60 Minutes interview that it looked like a nuclear bomb went off. But both him and Steve Witkoff denied that it's a genocide because, of course, reality is what they say it is. And the reason why they say it's not a genocide is because everyone that Israel killed is Hamas. This is according to Donald Trump. He actually said this. Listen.
We, meaning Israel, but I knew everything they were doing pretty much. I knew most of the things they were doing, but they've killed probably 70,000 of these people, Hamas.
Did you notice how he almost forgot to lie about the 70,000 Palestinians that he was referring to? He added, oh, they're all Hamas. That number is way higher in actuality, by the way, but he wants you to think that every single person that they've murdered is not innocent. They're all just Hamas. There's no such thing to him as an innocent Palestinian. To him, 5-year-old Hind Rajab, who was murdered after an Israeli tank fired more than 300 rounds at the car that she was trapped in, was just another Hamas militant. Rafat al-Arir, a professor and poet who was murdered along with his siblings and nephews in an airstrike after he criticized Israel, is nothing more than a Hamas militant. His daughter and newborn grandchild, by the way, were killed months later. I guess that they're also Hamas militants. The newborn, definitely Hamas militant. According to Trump, 12-year-old Ani Eldius, who dreamed of reaching 100,000 subscribers on his YouTube channel, who was murdered by Israel before being able to achieve that goal, is, just another Hamas militant waiting to kill innocent Israelis. It's just so fucking disgusting. And Trump is referred to as the most pro-life president in history, mind you. Which isn't surprising at this point because, again, reality is debatable to fascists, and they especially try to muddy the waters when carrying out a Holocaust to obscure their crimes. But they know what they're doing. I genuinely believe that they all know that what they're doing is wrong. They just don't care. And Trump knows in particular because I think that's why he said he's not going to get into heaven. And heaven's not real, but if it were real, he's right. He wouldn't get into heaven. He'd go down to hell. Like, it wouldn't even be a debate between him and God. He'd go straight down. But the only reason why he is personally trying to salvage the ceasefire deal is because it's bringing him one step closer to building the Trump resorts on Gaza beaches that he's been talking about for months now. If you look at this map here, you can see that Israel still controls 58% of the Gaza Strip, and that's likely going to be the part of Gaza that they are going to redevelop first and eventually dish out to foreign investors. A document that was published by the Washington Post shows Gaza being carved up for the Saudi Crown Prince and Elon Musk, and it also shows other areas in Gaza being dedicated to American AI data centers, and several islands will actually be part of Trump's Riviera resorts, and a small fraction of territory will go to 7 Gaza cities. I mean, how merciful of them to give them back some of the territory that they stole. But who knows, if that's going to stick, because Trump just threatened to go into Gaza with heavy force to straighten out Hamas if they didn't uphold their end of the agreement. No, you're not going crazy. He did send J.D. Vance to Israel to try to salvage the ceasefire, since they're the ones violating it. But at the end of the day, Trump was paid to represent the interests of Israel, not Palestinians. So that's what he's going to do. Not because he's ideologically committed to Zionism like Biden was, but because he's transactional and thinks that the genocide will personally benefit him in some way. So to the extent that the so-called ceasefire holds, as if that ship hasn't already sailed, it just means that the genocide is going to continue, albeit at a slower pace. But the genocide is still going to continue, full stop. And Republicans are already back to cheering on the deaths of Palestinians, because our country is governed by psychotic social outcasts who literally relish in death and destruction while they claim to be pro-life. And the irony is that while the United States and Israel accuse everyone else of terrorism, including American citizens at this point, history is going to look back at these two rogue governments and remember them as the most notorious perpetrators of terrorism in human history. And even though me saying that is very controversial right now, it's not going to be debatable in the future. It'll be a matter of fact in future history books. Mark my words.